Welcome to the Property Management Mastermind Show with your host, Brad Larson. Brad owns one of the fastest growing property management companies in San Antonio, Texas. This podcast is for property managers by property managers. You'll hear from industry-leading professionals on best practices, new ideas, success stories, and lessons learned. This is your opportunity to learn about the latest industry buzz surrounding property management, as well as tips and strategies to improve your business. Now here's your host, Brad Larson.
Today's show is sponsored by the National Property Management Network, providing insurance products and services to property managers such as tenant liability insurance. Visit them at nationalpropertymanagement.com. Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining us here at another episode of Property Management Mastermind. In studio today, we're going to have a gentleman named Mark Clayton, and he's been one of my clients since 2012. And Mark and I have been working together for quite some time now, over 5 years. And we manage a portfolio of substantial value and quite a few number of homes for him here in the San Antonio region. And what we're doing today is giving him an opportunity to kind of teach us a little bit about investing, working with property management, and we're going to hear from a very successful long-term single-family home investor. And some of the things you're going to learn from him is why he got into the single-family home game, some of the financing techniques, and the end state, some of the end game ideas that he has going on. So let's take a listen to Mark. Here it goes. So Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing super.
Great.
Good to be with you, Brad.
Thanks so much for having us, being with us in studio, let's say.
Sure thing.
It's exciting to have you here, and we want to talk about the investor mindset and how you've been able to be so successful in single-family homes, working with a property management company in the San Antonio market. And you also have been in other markets, so we can talk about that as well, because if I recall, you had several up in the Austin area. So to get into it, give us a little bit of your background and how you made your living, and maybe kind of transition into what got you started into single-family home investing.
Sure thing. Glad to do it again. Great to be here with you. It's always a pleasure to be with you and actually be in your new office here, which is super place. So
we love it.
I get to see all of your team, which is great. Well, my background, I was a hospital administrator. That's how I made a living. So I was CEO of several hospitals. My first entree into homes was the multiple homes I bought as we moved from town to town. Hospital administration is a bit of a nomadic profession, in that you very rarely do you stay in one community. So I was born and raised on the East Coast, but gradually migrated this way and worked for the Baptist Health System in San Antonio as a hospital administrator here, and then in the Austin area as a hospital administrator. And I semi-retired a couple of years ago, which was a part of the grand plan. And as I began to think about or anticipating the later years where we wanted to be active, but still provide me some of the intellectual interest, but the flexibility, property investing became something that I began to explore more about.
Yeah, you're being modest there, because I think you were a pretty high level guy there. When I visited your office a few years ago, it was two gatekeepers and a 10-story floor by the river in Austin there. It was a pretty neat deal. One of the things I wanted to see if you could talk more about is how you got your first start and what was trending to get you into single family home ownership.
Sure. So, as a hospital administrator, I really was comfortable with numbers. You had to be, running an operation like that. You're very comfortable with, revenue and expenses and productivity and really the operation of a business. When I looked at my personal portfolio, which is probably like many people, they may have a 401k, they may have other investments, and they're looking towards the future. Really an interest for me was I wanted a side gig that would potentially allow me to have a sort of a transitional business from when I was really working full time in the hospitals to maybe a time in my life where I wasn't working full time in the hospital. So really a several prong objective there. One, to get a side gig going that could sustain me as I looked to the future towards retirement. Secondly, to provide an avenue for sort of continuing intellectual stimulation as I look towards retirement. The people that I think are the most successful retirees are the people that never retire.
Right. I agree with you.
People that keep their mind busy, their body busy, and they're fully engaged. So for me, my background, the numbers were always very interesting to me. The growth and sort of the entrepreneurial thing was always interesting to me. And then yet really having my own thing, sort of having my own business that was apart from any company or, hospital system, but really my own thing. That was an appeal too. And so I started small. I had a friend that was a realtor that I charged her to help me find my first home. And we can get into, what I was looking for at that time, which is still really a big focus in terms of my portfolio, the kind of single family home that I thought was of interest to me. As I began to do, like anybody that was interested in a new business, the first thing I did was to try to learn and try to really have an understanding of that business first before I jumped in. I see some people that maybe do it the other way around. They jump in before they learn, and I think that's how you learn the hard way. Even when you do learn first and study first, and I'm not just reading books and magazines and internet, but talking to people that have been successful. To me, that's so important. But even when you do all of that homework, you will make mistakes. And so the key is to not make the big ones and to sort of avoid a flame out, but have those small mistakes allow you to become more and more successful over time. So for me, it was starting small with one home, two homes, three homes. When I got to three homes, that's when I said, well, this is fine, but we need to bring in the professionals. And that's when I began to really know seriously that having a professional property manager was going to be important. And that's how you and I first met, as I first began to sort of look at the people that were out there, the kind of people that I was interested in working with. So sort of backing up to my initial objectives. My initial objectives were not just to have one or two homes, but to have enough homes to where there was a critical mass there that potentially the portfolio became somewhat of a pension for me as I transitioned into retirement. One of the real lessons learned early on is that you can't really expect real estate, at least the kind of real estate that I'm invested in, to be the mother lode, any one home. It takes a lot of homes in order to bring you the kind of income that truly you could say, goodbye to the boss.
Sure.
and work for yourself.
That brings up a great point, because we were talking about before we started was, being fans of Bigger Pockets, and you've been turning me on to several of those investment resources as well through the years. And one of the questions I would ask, because you see this a lot on the Bigger Pockets forums, why would you choose single family homes versus multifamily? So kind of which direction made you go into more of the single family home space? Well,
I like how the single family home diversifies me from a risk standpoint.
Okay.
So if you have, a tenant that flames out, or you have a house that's the plumbing goes crazy, that's going to happen to one home. And so that's one of, let's say you have 10 houses. So you've got 1/10 of your portfolio that has an issue, as opposed to different types of real estate where you've, multifamily, where, if you have an issue with a property, that could be your entire investment that you have an issue with.
Yeah, what if there was a shooting or something and then half your tenants just up and left because they felt unsafe?
Or anything like, a fire or other issues that can happen. So I liked how it spread my risk. The other thing is that for my, again, the property that I'm looking for is the kind that I would want my mother to live in. So when I look at a property, can I see my mother living here? Can I see a small family living there? Can I see people living there that will be happy, that will take good care of that home, think of that house as their home? That's what I look for. Because, again, part of the other piece of it for me is that this is not just a money-making thing. I want my tenants to be happy. And I want them to feel like, this has been a good place for them to be.
Yeah, definitely you're a landlord with a heart. And that's one thing that I've appreciated working with you for the years is you have the ability to just say, yes, if they need that, let's get it done. They're in dire needs. You've been able to take care of your tenants working with us throughout the entire time we worked with it, which has been since 2011.
Well, and I think that's important to me. It's part of the calculus early on was, I wanted a 3.2 or maybe a 4, 2.5 that was 10 years old or less. That was in a neighborhood that was a stable neighborhood, a lot of young families, that was good schools, an area that, again, back to my where would mom live, where could I envision a young family being? If you are investing in that kind of property and buying it at a discount, and we can talk about that too, but if you're buying it at a discount and you're finding that needle in the haystack that's there, then that's the kind of property that when things go, and things will go wrong on the property, you need to get it fixed, then you've positioned yourself to where those things don't happen that often. But when they do, you take care of them quickly and you take care of them right, and you take care of them for more of a long-term hold perspective. Which kind of gets me back to that first question you asked about how I got into it, sort of why I got into it. And when I shared with you, I saw this more as a transitional thing and towards a pension. The goal for me was always longer term. So this wasn't a fix or flip type of business plan, which, not to knock that, because that is a legitimate and can be a good approach to go. But for me, and again, all real estate is a bit individual. For me, it was I wanted to build a portfolio for the longer term, which means I'm looking for homes that have good bones, that are going to be properties that I could hold or see myself holding very long. So. But when things do go wrong, we want to take care of them. We want to do it the right way. We had an issue come up this week that we could have just repaired a condenser, replaced a condenser, or replaced the entire system. Because of the kind of unit I had, we knew the Freon was going to be will be in an out-of-date situation in 3 years. So I could have spent probably a third of the money and just kind of patch it.
Right.
But in 3 years, we're going to have to replace the whole thing anyway, if anything else would go wrong. So we bite the bullet and get the new system for now. That positions us better. And so if I was looking short term, I probably wouldn't have made that decision.
Sure.
I would have said, well, let's just patch it. Let's do the bare minimum, to make things work.
So the investor-minded folks out there could be listening, or the property management company owners, they're going to want to probably know the nuts and bolts of this. So let's maybe talk about funding your first few deals, and then how that's grown into even commercial financing for the latter few deals.
Right.
Kind of go from the start and then transition, and how you went through to get more and more properties.
So we know on the front end that you're going to be limited in terms of the number of deals that you could finance. For me, I was interested initially during the first 5 to 7 years that I was involved in property investing, to leverage as much as I could. So at the time, the rates were attractive. At the time, I think I got some 3s and 4s in terms of percentage interest for a 30-year note. And my limit was I did I think my first 4 houses I did with SWBC Bank. I used Guild Mortgage and Wells Fargo, and basically built up a portfolio of 7, 8, 9, 10 homes using, the local mortgage banker.
Yeah. And I think the cap was 10, right? The cap is still 10. At that time, it was 10. Let's go back a little bit further. Exactly kind of what you were looking for with the pricing of the homes, how you made offers, kind of the schematics of the deal, let's say, and kind of what your formula was in acquiring these homes.
So I love a home that maybe has been neglected, but it's on a street that looks great. And because I didn't mind, spending, $5,000 to $10,000 or whatever, sometimes up to $15,000 to get a house looking great again. So again, buying for the neighborhood, buying for those criteria that I said before. The discount comes by finding somewhat of a distressed property. And, but again, on a street that looks great, and you could envision, man, if we just do a few things here, maybe take care of the floor, maybe, all new floors, maybe we go in there with some new appliances, maybe we paint everything, put some, shades in the window, get the yard looking good, that this is going to be a place that will rent all day long. So
now, being with you from the beginning, we went out and found those homes. We found some HUD homes that you and I helped you purchase.
And those were ones I remember us talking about. You weren't exactly excited about going through the paperwork process with me, because it can be a little bit, at the time, and maybe it's gotten better, but at the time, there are many steps in the process. If you don't dot one I, you're thrown out and all that effort is wasted.
Yep.
I was fortunate, frankly, I was working with you on this because you have attention to detail, which is, again, if we started making a list here of what makes a good property manager and a good property management team, attention to detail, also a willingness to work with the owner to do something that could maybe enable that owner to get into a property that's going to be a good part of their portfolio. So for us, it was, let's do this HUD thing. So we were able to buy those houses at, say, a house that would normally be priced about $150,000, $160,000 in the San Antonio area. Maybe we got for $120,000, maybe we got for $110,000, $115,000. That's at a discount. I mean, for San Antonio, for the kinds of properties, once we got them back to really market condition, we could have flipped it and sold it for $150,000, $160,000.
Yeah.
So
you made a great point as we were talking about this before we started recording, is it would be tough for you to replace those properties with today's market.
Right.
Because, 5, 6, 8 years ago, rebounding from the recession, things were still kind of in a 6-month holding pattern for times on market. So we were able to go out and find those deals, but don't have a disheartened, out there and whoever's listening, because the market is cyclical. It's going to come around.
So those first 3 homes I bought before I met you, bought on my own, as I mentioned, my real estate friend, who really was not expert in investment properties like we were talking about for single family homes, helped me get those. I didn't buy those at a discount when I was learning. And, in retrospect, I should have. Now, the fortunate thing for me was I bought them at a time in the market where the market was in a little bit of a slump. So this is 10, 12 years ago. Okay. The market was in a little bit of a slump at that time. And so I didn't buy at the peak. And those 3 homes are still a part of my portfolio. The market is now, appreciated significantly above where I purchased them. And we've maintained them. But after that 3, where I'd say, at that point, I was either going to, because when I look back at those 3 properties, I think one of them I really wasn't cash flowing positive on. The other 2 I was, $100 or $200, a month. And I was either going to get out of the business or I was going to get smart.
Okay.
And so
you were stuck in no man's land at that point.
Right.
Because I like to use that term, either stay small or go big.
Right.
And I think you were right there at that level. You were stuck in the middle.
Right. So that's, the only game you've got at that point is either where you're either going to sell and take your equity and go someplace else, or you're going to figure out a way to really make it work. For me, early on, and as I look back at and many people that think about their life cycle as an investor, some people describe it as, when you're early and mid-career, you're really looking at wealth accumulation, trying to grow your asset base as big as you can. Mm-hmm. And then you transition at some point towards cash flow as king.
Right.
And that'd be nice to have both, but and that's the goal when you buy at a discount and then maintain those properties and manage those properties well, you can achieve both of wealth accumulation, net worth accumulation, and cash flow. But particularly as you get into the sort of the back third of your investment horizon, like I am, I've just turned 60, you're looking at really cash flow is more important. Mm-hmm. Particularly if you're not going to be bringing in a paycheck from a primary job. You're looking towards having your savings, accumulated savings, but also your investment properties bring in cash. Then it was important to really look at how can we really optimize that cash flow per month. The key has got to be is buying homes at a discount. And I'd say either do the work to buy distressed properties in areas that will have tenants, or be patient for mm-hmm. that time when no one wants to buy a house, mm-hmm. everybody's scared to buy a house, and jump then.
Yeah. I also remember one of the things that we were looking at is in the portfolio you have, some homes may not cash flow well, and some mm-hmm. homes may cash flow well. So what that does is that creates kind of like an averaging out effect.
Absolutely. And they're different. Some of the homes that maybe didn't cash flow well, they're in areas that we know that we will be able to rent all day long. It's going to be a steady Eddie, or maybe a home that has appreciated dramatically. Mm-hmm. But again, my focus is to hold over the long term. Now, having said that, several years ago, I went through a portfolio pruning process, which I think mm-hmm. is important to kind of take your portfolio, put it on a spreadsheet, and do sort of a bottom-up analysis on what are your dogs, what are your cows, mm-hmm. And which is what I did. And from my perspective, it was if my goal was transitioning from, again, more of a net worth side and diversification of my overall investments perspective to more of a cash flow emphasis, then I was looking to really rank order those properties that gave me the very best cash flow that I felt were still going to be long-term holds.
Mm-hmm. And we debated over those properties on which ones you wanted to sell. And I think you made the right decision. And I think you sold 2 or 3 at least, maybe a few more. I can't mm-hmm. remember exactly.
Yeah, 2 or 3. And I think, so sort of back to your issue, which kind of reminds me of how I got in and what we used for financing initially. Once we ran against that ceiling, we looked to, of 10, we looked to what else was out there. And I talked to other investors who they were using for that, different options. I ran across a federal credit union, A+ Federal Credit Union, which has a presence in the sort of the Central Texas area. Mm-hmm. I think they're down in San Marcos now, so they're kind of all the way from Georgetown to San Marcos. They could not have been better to work with. What was helpful for me when I had the conversations with them, initial conversations about what my goals were, what I had in terms of my investment properties, what I was looking to do, which was to grow beyond 10 to 20, 30, 40 homes to really grow into the future. They told me that they could be my partner in doing that. And they also were able to give me very competitive rates. They gave me at the time, I think it was a 5%, 20-year amortization, a 10-year note. So basically, mm-hmm. at the end of 10 years, we'd have to figure out what to do. But it gave me a competitive enough monthly mortgage rate, essentially, that the numbers worked. Mm-hmm. And so, and for them, it was much more straightforward than a mortgage application and that sort of thing. I had to sort of update my business plan with them every year, show them my numbers mm-hmm. In terms of performance of all of our properties. But basically, they were able to ride with me as we went and sort of built the portfolio.
That's really fascinating because basically you transitioned from a residential type of mortgage situation into a commercial lending. Now, commercial lending, they're looking more at the project,
right?
The cash flow, the metrics of the project versus you, the individual, wanting to make that transaction. That's really neat. So can you talk more about the metrics of the commercial side?
Well, and another plus for working with a federal credit union like that is that they didn't give me a loan, let's say of, $1 million loan, and then let me then use those funds to invest in the different properties. For me, I wanted the flexibilities where each one of these properties I had a note with. So as I added these different properties, each single family home had a distinct loan attached to it. Mm-hmm. So as I look to prune it, or if I look to deleverage that property, I could do it one by one by one by one, which was attractive. What I was trying to do is to find a lender that had as close to single family home primary residence mortgage rates as possible, and had the longest term that I could possibly get, longest amortization that I could find. And that's what I found in A+ Federal Credit Union.
So people just have to kind of do their own diligence as far as finding a commercial lender source. And I like the credit unions, like you say. I think that's a good spot to go to because right now, residential lending is going to cap out at still 10 homes, from my understanding. So they have to look to go beyond that. A great example is looking at Bigger Pockets the other day. Somebody said they want to do 1,000 homes.
Right.
Their goal is 1,000 single family homes. And it's almost, you have to chuckle because as soon as they hit 8, it'll just be overwhelm them, and they'll be capped at 10, and then they're going to have to figure something else out, let alone get to 100, not even trying to get to 1,000.
Well, and I think that it also helps that I was looking at the same time that I was also fully employed. That was important for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, they saw this, I had several homes. And we had this grand plan. I had a good business plan. The properties that I had were well performing. But I mean, even at 10 properties, so maybe that's 20 or 30 grand a year that you're making on that in terms of actual income off of that, or cash flow income. So that's fine. But it helped that I had this other job, my primary job, I had a good income. So when you're looking for financing, what I would say is, as you're looking to transition towards a commercial lender, try to do it when you're still employed, still have a main job going on with a steady paycheck that you've had. Don't give up on your steady paycheck before you've obtained your financing, have your business fully functioning. My fear is if you don't do that, it'll force you to make compromises on what you're looking for, which won't position you well for making the optimal cash flow and making the best investment over time. So
great advice.
So for me, it was important, keep my job, get this other thing going, get the commercial lending in place, position myself to grow. And so along that same time, again, came the need to have professional management engaged. And if I was now pretty well positioned in terms of the funding of these, that's great. Now we needed to have professional management to where I was not spending time during my days when I had plenty to do as a hospital administrator managing properties. Mm-hmm. The other thing that I considered when I looked at commercial lending is that I also knew that a part of my business plan was to unwind these mortgages. So it didn't bother me that I had a 10-year note with a 20-year amortization on each one of these homes, because I said, within 10 years, I'll be paying off each home one by one by one. Yep. So what I did when I did that portfolio analysis several years ago, one of the factors was, where is my most costly money? And so I lined up all the interest rates that I had. Again, I mentioned somewhere in the 3s and 4s. And then the A+ Federal Credit Union was at 5%. So those were some of the first to take out. Mm-hmm. And so I just bing, 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 took out each note along the way. Now I've deleveraged myself from all of those commercial notes. And again, part of my goal was, when I do this, what's that going to do? It's going to increase my cash flow by whatever that note was per home.
In getting those commercial loans, did they like to see that you had professional property management in place? Is that a big part of that?
It was. I mean, they wanted to make sure that my portfolio was they needed to know the addresses where these were, that I had professional management in place, that I wasn't trying to, do this on my own. Again, they're looking at is that revenue stream going to be predictable? And for them and for me, one of the key factors is having professional management in place so that, we get the right tenants in place, that they're there for the longest term possible, and that when there is turnover, that it's managed well, and that we're getting, rent appreciation, happening on a timely basis, rent collection when any if there's ever been any foreclosure or not foreclosure, needing to, push somebody out of a home, that's done in the right way. Thank God I've never had one of those situations.
Luckily, yeah, we've had good tenants. So that does affect your NOI, which is a metric they love to throw out there, your net operating income. And so that's something that you put into place. You just budget it in there, and then that your vacancy is going to be minimal, if any.
Right.
Because 2 months of vacancy would kill your entire cash flow for the entire year, right? So you are very aware of that, and so are we, as any good professional management company would be. Get that home rented quickly. Even if you have to drop 25 or drop 50 or 100 in the price, that money makes a lot more sense than losing 2 or 3 months of full month's rent. So you were able to understand that from the beginning as an overall picture, because we have owners that we work with. Of course, every management company is going to have that same issue. You recommend a price and they don't want to budge no matter what. And it's just the dumbest math ever, because they just don't get the big picture that you drop a little bit, get something in is better than nothing, and you'll mitigate that loss versus, I just want to be stubborn and get X, and it takes you 6 months to get X.
You can't be emotional, when this is a business. You can't be emotional when you're dealing with, offer prices for houses, when you're looking at lease rates. You've got to be very objective. That's one of the reasons why I like a third party like you being involved in those things, for sure. Sort of getting back to the decisions we made in terms of investing. When I was doing my initial research, I wasn't. I was sort of agnostic in terms of what area would I want to invest in, where would it be, what kinds of properties, what region. It just so happened, frankly, that Texas was a good place to invest. Yeah. That Central Texas was a great place to invest, and San Antonio was even a better place to invest. Mm-hmm. I like the fact that we've got, the educational infrastructure here, the healthcare infrastructure here, the military presence here, the overall business climate, very, very healthy. In terms of an attractive place for families to go, the tax environment here, everything was positive from my perspective as an investor that told me this is going to be a good place to invest at the time, and still housing relatively affordable, to get into vis-a-vis other areas of the country. And I found up sort of in the outer ring of Austin, I could find similar attributes. Yeah. So that was important for me. So I would say that if I lived in some other community, I would have looked outside of the area, which I think, again, with professional property management piece available now, you could become sort of regionally agnostic. And again, that's something that Bigger Pockets talks about, and others.
You can live anywhere and buy homes anywhere.
Yeah, and so, but for me, it happened to be that's the way it worked out. Where the houses that I bought were in this general area. Having said that, beyond the first 3 or so houses, I don't think I've even seen or visited the other houses that I now own. And you guys were great. You personally, I can remember going to the one of the houses specifically with your camera and kind of walking me. Hey, you said, Mark, I think this one's going to meet your criteria pretty well. Let me show you what I think are some of the positives here. Let me point out a couple of other things.
Yeah.
You were able to sort of pre-screen some of these houses that I was looking to invest in.
And we told you what the dogs were too, because there's no way I wanted to rent a house or sell you a house and you couldn't rent it. So the way we were doing that is we were doing just videos on our iPhones and posting that to YouTube, and then send you a quick link from the field and you're able to watch the video. Now they have Skype and FaceTime and all this other stuff, even faster ways for people to go out and view homes from a distance, as long as they find the right person to assist them on the user end. As a side note, I want you to tell our story.
Yeah.
Hit me that story with the home in Georgetown that you bought and you held for a year. I love that story. Great.
Okay, remind me about this one.
So you bought a home in Georgetown. This is North Austin.
Yeah.
And you held it for a year, and the depreciation was crazy. Do you remember this one you sold?
Again, that was a part of my portfolio analysis that I did, several years ago, and I've been fortunate though. The homes that I do have now, all of them have appreciated so well and have done well, but others have not. This one you're mentioning, I swear to God, I can't remember.
You sold it pretty well though. It went well after you held it for a year. You sold it and made a real good chunk off of it. If you don't remember it, I'm blindsiding you. It's okay.
Well, again, that. The time frame that I bought some of these homes, that's the other thing to mention, is that what I decided to do once I had the sort of the business plan figured out, I had learned from my mistakes. I knew that I needed to buy from a discount. I knew how to buy at a discount. I knew what to look for. I had the money lined up. There were several months that I was closing on 2 houses. And several days that I closed on 2 houses the same day.
Yeah.
Acquiring it because if they hit the criteria, bingo, I'm going.
Yep.
And I knew at the time that it was a really good time to buy because people were scared. And so there was less competition. It's not that there wasn't, but competition, but there's less competition. So by buying at a discount, then the market rebounds, and it was possible to make on a $150,000 house, maybe you make $60,000 in a year or so. Yeah. And then you turn around and pay off one of your mortgages that
just cascade it down.
So when I deleveraged, I waited long enough to where people were saying, is there going to be a momentary pause? So there was a decline, and then that's when I accumulated a lot of the properties, and then we're up sort of at a frothy level, and then people saying there's going to be a little bit of pause. That's when I decided to jump off some of these houses, and then deleverage. The Georgetown is one I forget, I guess, but
you did well on that home. I do remember that. So outside of the numbers, I want to get into some of the metrics, and you talked about the purchase price. So outside of that, because that's clearly where you win, right? The old saying is to buy it right. I mean, how can you screw up on a flip when you buy it right? Outside of that, did you have a favorite metric that you lean towards? Is it a cap rate? Is it going to be a cash on cash return or return on your investment? Kind of talk me about your favorite metric there.
So I'll tell you about the tool I use, and it sort of provides me a lot of those same metrics. I use a tool called Property Tracker.
Property Tracker,
and you can go out there. If you put that in Google, you'll see it. I think it costs me like $90 a year to use that software. So there's a property analyzer on there. There's some great tools on BiggerPockets as well. I've just been using Property Tracker for so long, and that it works for me. So I enter in the price. I enter in all the key data on there, everything from the property taxes that are looked to be what potential rent is, the homeowners association, all the costs that are unique to that property, and then as well as I enter in what we think, what the market says is the appreciation of that area specific to that zip code. Then if there's a mortgage associated with it, which all of mine that I purchased, I had a note with initially, put that in, what the costs there are, what the closing costs are going to be, literally fully load everything. I like to see, for me, I like to see, cash flow over $200 a month, again, fully per home.
Okay.
Fully assuming that there's going to be a 5% vacancy, that there's going to be, repairs. I've got those costs, factored in as well. At least $200 positive cash flow per month. Cap rate, I'd like to see a cap rate, over 5%, cap rate for single family home. Those are the key numbers. When I look at return on investment, I like to see something better than what I would get in my 401k or invested elsewhere. Again, back to the goals initially, I had a lot of my my retirement savings in the stock market. For me, it was probably 70% in stocks and 30% in bonds. Index funds.
Okay.
Again, going the Warren Buffett way is invest in index funds and own houses is what he recommends. So I had that, but I wanted another stabilizing influence, another set of bonds, if you will. And for me, those were houses.
Yeah.
So I look at the returns here. If I can be better than the stock market portfolio in terms of return on investment, cash flow, a couple $100 a month or better, and have a cap rate that's what I described, and that sort of meets my criteria. Now, having said that, I've got some homes that cash flow in the $600 or $800 per month. And then I've got some that may be, 100 or two. But as you were saying earlier, it all kind of averages out.
Yeah. If I may, let me interject a couple things here. So you're visiting our office today. We're going to do our annual, basically, tax review, right? Because you're prepping your income taxes. We have the homes that we manage for you. Give me a tidbit of what depreciation is to an investor, the magic thing called depreciation. Give me your 2 cents on that.
So I love making money without looking like you made any money. So, depreciation is a great thing in that it takes what may look like you're going to have to pay taxes on that, $3,000 or $4,000 a year cash flow. And with depreciation, assuming you've held the home less than 27 and a half years, you're able to basically null out that income and have no tax liability.
Isn't that amazing?
Which is fantastic. So again, back to if you've got your money in a taxable account in an index fund, you're going to be paying taxes on that.
Right.
So so that's a huge advantage for me. Sort of back to and for everyone looking at this kind of investment opportunity, but back to the annual meeting thing. This is one of the things that I really like about your approach is that it works for me, it works for you, that every year we would do an annual review with your whole team together with me. We'd kind of look at property by property. I like fresh set of objective eyes. So sort of going around the table and let's talk about Purple Martin, or let's talk about one of our other houses that we have. And, we all have our favorites for one reason or another, but looking at, how is it performing? What are the issues currently, either with tenants or with maintenance issues, with neighborhoods? And then we always have a conversation about, where are we in the business cycle? Are we ready to accumulate more right now? Or are we on the pause button? And the answer for me is I'm always ready if we can find that property that's that makes sense. Right now it's harder.
It is.
Again.
Yeah, the pause button sounds about right, but I think it's going to turn, maybe 17, maybe 18. I think we're going to see a downturn eventually to where everything's cyclical like we talked about. So in all this, kind of to shore this up with you, do you have an end game? What's your end game? Is it like a business to where you can build it up to a certain extent and sell it, or you just want to nurse the cash flow with no end in sight? Kind of where are you thinking you're going? So
for me, it's long term, as probably as long as I'm alive and my wife's alive. This will be part of our investments real long term. Our goal is to maintain these properties to where they're good to live in, and our portfolio would be one that we'd be proud of. My children are also interested in real estate. My daughter's husband's involved in real estate in a very serious way in Houston and on the commercial side. I feel confident that when the time comes that we can turn properties over to them. It'd be nice, sort of as an inheritance thing, to have that. So they represent by that time they will represent a good chunk of equity, not 100% equity, multi-million-dollar portfolio, which could be maintained by them for cash flow, or if there are needs later on in our retirement where we need to have a couple $100,000 right away. Potentially, again, if they're maintained with as they are being now together with you, they'll be more liquid than those that aren't maintained. And so that's the end game for me is open ended. I don't have a particular need to divest. It's to hold for the long term.
Good. Glad to hear that from a business owner standpoint, and a great perspective on passing that down to your kids. I think that's just phenomenal. It's great. I think everyone likes to hear that type of stuff. So, Mark, I wanted to say thank you for coming on to the show. Been a great time talking to you here, and appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Well, let me just say one more thing.
Sure.
And that is how much I appreciate what you do, your vision for your company, how you've built your team. To me, that says a whole lot. And knowing that really I get, and I think you treat your other customers this way, with personal attention, where you've assigned your team to handle different things with my properties. Again, your attention to detail, your professionalism, all these things are great. And I don't think you treat me any differently than you have your team treat the tenants that we take care of. And so that consistency of behavior and demeanor, I think, is really, really important for property managers. Again, if I had the time, maybe I would do it myself. But with you, I feel like that you do it better than I could do it myself. So that's important, and what I think is an advantage for you and your company.
Thanks for saying that, Mark. I'm blushing right now, so good thing that folks can't see me at home. Thanks again for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. Take care.
My pleasure.
Today's show has been sponsored by Virtually Incredible, providing tenant screening services, call center services, and video production services to property managers. You may also visit them at virtuallyincredible.com.
This has been a podcast episode by PropertyManagementProductions.com. Be sure to subscribe to our podcast, leave us feedback, and come back for our next episode.